Alright guys, Touchgrab back again today. Hope you're enjoying your Monday so far. Today we're going to talk about the potential of the CDL 2021 season. Of course, with champs on the horizon, a lot of people are thinking about exactly what next season is going to look like, right? Are we going to be moving to PC? Is it going to stay on PlayStation? But also, is it still going to be 5v5 in Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War? No announcement really of how exactly the game is going to look like. Maybe we'll get some announcements in coming weeks here. Hopefully we'll have something else to talk about. However, Hector and Nameless on the Eavesdrop podcast a couple of days ago talked about the very real possibility, as Nameless describes it, of it moving back to 4v4 next season. This is not something we've really heard about, not something we've really had to discuss. However, it seems like Nameless probably knows more than us that 4v4 is a very real possibility next season, and certainly would have major implications on how the CDL looks, how the landscape looks, of course, and the potential, of course, of whether we're going to be going to 16 teams. If that doesn't happen, the amount of players potentially on the sidelines, potentially players out of a job, if the amount of substitutes is reduced. Share a few clips in a couple of minutes time here, and certainly is a major topic to discuss. And, you know, when it went to the 5v5 format in the Black Ops 4 season, I definitely didn't think it was a good idea. I definitely thought they were making a mistake, and I think that has been kind of proven over time. I do think that 4v4 Call of Duty is better than 5v5 for some reasons we can discuss in a couple of minutes time here. Intrigued to hear your thoughts down below though, as always. Like if you guys enjoyed the video, subscribe if you are new. Also to mention, for the next week we're going to be running this competition, this giveaway with Draft Buff, to give away a team controller of your choice and 5 Rab skins in the Draft Buff app as well. If you want to enter, the tweet will be linked down in the pinned comment and the description box below. Go and follow the instructions. You know how these types of things work. That would be really, really cool, and well, you can win something for free. What's not to love? So this came out from Intel Call of Duty credit over here a few days ago. I just thought I'd put this on screen. Pretty entertaining clip. And well, remember when they announced 5v5 came pretty pertinent right in a few days time with this whole situation that we're now talking about.
Also, one major item that's going to be different for the Call of Duty World League players next season. Dan, tell me about it.
That's right. We are moving to a 5v5 format this year. First time ever.
That's quite possibly the worst secret we've ever had in Call of Duty World League history, but I can't.
Now, not too long before that, in June, we get this from Crone saying no info yet on 4v4. I doubt we'll ever see 4v4 again, unfortunately. However, this clip comes out from this most recent Eavesdrop podcast with Nameless talking about it. Going to share a couple of minutes on screen here of them talking about some of the implications of this, but also when Nameless actually talks about the fact that this rumor is a very real possibility indeed.
Which brings me back to the 4v4 rumor, right? What is, like, imagine, dude. I said it. I don't want to see it. I want to close. I want to close my eyes, and then I want to see what happened. I don't want to experience it.
So it scares me because we see like pros retire every so often. You know, there's a lot of pros who play and then they're just gone, and you don't really hear too much about them because they just start to go on the amateur scene, and they weren't that great when they were a pro. But if we switch to 4v4, there will be a lot of pros that are huge names that have been in Call of Duty forever with really big fan bases.
Staple names.
That are now on, staples that are now on like the
Twilight.
Do we really keep him? Because if we keep him, we got to pay him a lot of money.
I don't want to hear it.
And do we want to pay him a lot? Like, it's really, really scary because with 5v5, some of those pros, you can keep them on the team and they're solid enough to compete and win, but they don't have to be the star. But in 4v4, depending on the type of game that we have, some of those pros become the odd man out because of a combination of, you know, what they bring to the team and also how much you have to pay those guys. Mm-hmm. It's really scary to think about, but then again, I really want it to be 4v4, but I don't want to see a lot of those pros go. You know, a lot of times you're just grinding and trying to become the best player you can be, and you don't, you know, grow in the other areas in your industry, so they could be left out. So if we go 4v4, that's a lot of people just going from like 100 to 0 super quick, and I just don't know where a lot of those guys fit in, like you said, because not every team is like energy like Huntsman in producing content and can, you know, have players on to do that type of thing. And also not every team, even if they plan to do that, can extract that kind of the greatness out of them to be a good content creator in the sense that it makes sense for the business. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's super scary, dude, for a lot of these guys, because that 4v4 rumor is gaining a lot of traction, and I could definitely see it happening.
Say we go to 4v4. Okay, so now we have 12 pro players who are no longer playing. What happens to the bench at that point? Like, what, you know, so there's going to be a massive shuffle. It ain't just going to be the one extra player. It's going to be everything else, because everything else has to get adjusted. If it goes to that, you no longer need to have a mandatory two-man bench, right? Now you have to have only one or whatever. You know, so scenarios like that, like there's a ripple effect that happens.
So at the start of the Black Ops 4 season, they decided to move into this 5v5 format, and the real thinking was that, well, the casual players are going to love competitive if all of a sudden we're now playing in the same 5v5 versus 5v5 format. I really didn't see how this was a great argument because, as you guys might remember, going into Black Ops 4, it used to be 4v4 was competitive and then 6v6 was public matches. Into Black Ops 4, they changed it so that public matches were 5v5 and so was competitive. And, you know, the idea was that casual players would then look at competitive and think, oh, it's the same game, they're playing 5v5 just like we do, therefore competitive play must be perfectly reasonable and fine. However, I don't really think that's the case. Like, you think about ground war and stuff, everyone can still play like 9v9 ground war. I don't think the amount of players on the team really affect things, and sometimes you go into a public match and you're playing 4v4 regardless, right? And the reason why this is a big deal is because back in the day you would have maps designed for 6v6 public match play, and kind of the similar maps, to be honest, in the Black Ops 4 season were kind of designed in a similar manner. That's how the size and the layout of the maps tend to work, and 6v6 public match play tends to be great for 4v4 competitive, and the reasoning really is for that is that pros know much more about the game than the casual players do. You think of a standard like 6-man casual player team, you've probably got 2 guys running around like maniacs, you've got like 2 guys camping in a room the entire game, and then you've got 2 guys maybe being kind of methodical, moving around the map pretty slowly. That team dynamic is very slow. Casual players tend to not know exactly when, where players are coming from, where the spawns are, when they can move fast and move through an area, and when they have to slow down. Professional players are much, much better at knowing when to be fast and when to be slow and wait for engagements. And a 4-man professional team on the map puts on much more map pressure, if you want to look at it like that, than a 6v6 public match team, right? I imagine that certainly professional players play at a much faster pace. They know where the enemies are going to be. They're moving around the map quicker. They have better movement. All these types of things mean that a 4v4 competitive play is basically the same as a 6v6 public match play in terms of the amount of pressure that is going on the map. And that's why 4v4 back in the day tended to make so much sense on a map like Standoff or Raid or whatever. I'm just thinking of Black Ops 2 examples, tended to make much more sense on that map, pretty much a game that was designed for 6v6. However, you then add 2 more professional players onto the map and things kind of get pretty chaotic, and I think we've seen that over the last couple of seasons, especially really on certain maps in Black Ops 4, like Frequency, for example, and in this game as well on Modern Warfare. Certain maps are just absolute chaos with 10 people on the map. The maps are pretty much designed the same size and everything as they were back in the day, especially in Black Ops 4, for example, but now we're looking at 10 players on the map as opposed to 8, and I definitely think that this has had a detrimental effect on how easy the game is to watch and to spectate and to keep up with individual players' performances. Like, it's pretty easy to miss the action when there's 10 players on the team, and given how fast-paced the game is, I'm not sure it works quite as well as it does for Counter-Strike, for example, or in Search and Destroy. 5v5 is still probably okay for that reason. When some people die, it comes down to 1v1, you can spectate people and keep up with the action that way, whereas in Hardpoint it can be pretty chaos, right, with 10 players on the map. So I definitely think the 5v5 move was a mistake. I don't really think it had particularly any impact on casual players getting involved in Call of Duty. And then, of course, going into Modern Warfare, they backtracked, right, and now casual players once again 6v6. So what's the point of making things 5v5 if the only reason for 5v5 was to align between one and the other? And then, of course, we've gone back on it on one side, on the casual side, so why don't we go back on it on the other side, that being at the professional competitive play side? And this is some tweets that I just found from a while ago talking about this issue. I felt like 5v5 was a little too much. Maps played perfect for 4v4. This was back in the 2018 days from Methods when Black Ops 4 was coming out. Personally, for a lot of reasons, hope CoD stays 4v4. I don't think 5v5 would affect growth whatsoever, and it would make for so many more complications than it's worth. 4v4 works, especially in our game modes, and well, we get this from 2019 talking about how has CoD been since the change. Has it been better or worse? Most people saying it's probably got worse on the whole in this tweet from Nick Maniac last year. Now, of course, the major consideration to come out of this is exactly what the future holds, right? Because this is all the professional players that are currently in the league. If it was to go to 4v4, this would change up significantly, right? And if it was to go to 4v4, you would imagine it would make more sense to expand the league to 16 teams if that is an option, right? Because otherwise a lot of players are going to disappear. And as Hector said in that clip, the fact of the matter is that maybe players right now, you've got to have 7 players on the team, right? You've got to have 5 starters and then 2 substitutes. Maybe they change the rules so that you only need 4 substitutes or 4 starting players and then 1 substitute. What happens to the rest of the players? These players that don't really have necessarily great brands or great YouTube followings or great Twitch followings or anything like that, what exactly are they going to do, right? So fantastic players that typically get into the top echelons of Call of Duty And all of these players are obviously fantastic, you know, compared to the average Call of Duty player. And a lot of players that maybe can't quite cut it in terms of, you know, in terms of pure slaying power, that have typically been veteran leadership type of players, they might be left on the windowsill now, given that you've got players like a BZ Simcelium and, well, a lot of the players that are the better players on a lot of these great teams are the younger up-and-coming guys, and maybe some of the older guys are going to left out to dry a little bit, right? And that's not necessarily a good thing for when we look at the personalities of our scene. However, I think the game would probably play better in a 4v4 format. There's a lot of things to discuss. You've then also got to consider the business implications of this, right? Like, let's say you are a Huntsman or pretty much any team, and you're salarying a lot of players. What do, right? You've salaried these guys. You might have them in a contract for the next, like, 5 years. I think Hector said in this, I'm not sure I put the clip on screen, but he was saying how he doesn't really mind about having these players because he's making these players into, like, content assets so he can make other things from them rather than just them being a player. But a lot of teams have signed a lot of players, and they might have them in multiple-year contracts, and now it's all going 4v4, and all of a sudden it's like, well, damn, we have players that we don't need. We have excess capacity. What are we going to do? Are we going to sell them to another team, but do other teams want them, given they've already got 7 players, and maybe they only have to go down to 5? So a lot of players are going to be left out to dry. What happens with the contract situation? Are the organization is still locked into that contract for a certain amount of years, or has there been a clause in place if something like this was to go down? Who knows what's going on, but I'm sure a lot of players would miss out, especially if we don't go into a 16-team league, which maybe isn't too likely, given things are somewhat considered to be online, right? And maybe there's a lot of organizations looking to get into Call of Duty, but thinking, well, maybe we can't get the revenue and can't get too much back from our brand if we're not going to be able to have LAN events, as was talked about a few days ago. So very interesting topic. I do hope it happens for some reason. I think that in long-term Call of Duty, I think it's played better 4v4 traditionally, and it makes more sense for the fan perspective. And I definitely think the game plays in a superior manner when it is 4v4, and probably makes it easier to follow particular teams as well, having 4 guys on it rather than 5. Hasn't had all the downsides I was imagining 5v5, but I definitely think it's a better game 4v4, but it does have numerous complications for the organizations themselves, but also the league, right? Like, how exactly do you sell this that it's going 4v4? And if it does go back to 4v4, we've really got to stick with that for a long time, because the organizations, I'm sure, will not be happy with this situation and the flip-flopping that seems to have happened over the last couple of years. But if they do make the decision now, then, who knows? Maybe they don't make the decision at all. Maybe it just stays 5v5 forever. We go to PC and we just never look back from there. But, I definitely think 4v4 has its certain advantages, especially how the games are made and the way the dynamics work. But it certainly will cause some major issues as well. And I imagine if this is on the horizon, a lot of these organizations are in deep discussions with the CDL as to exactly how they tackle this. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like if you did, subscribe if you're new. As always, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time.